The afternoon sun was bright as Maria walked down the busy street with her daughter Lisa. They had been planning this special lunch for weeks. Lisa had just gotten her acceptance letter to medical school, and Maria wanted to celebrate at the fancy French restaurant she had heard so much about. Maria looked at her simple blue dress and worn leather bag. She had been saving money for months to afford this meal. Every dollar counted in their household, but her daughter's achievement deserved something special. She had called 3 times to make sure their reservation was confirmed. The restaurant stood tall with its elegant glass windows and gold letters spelling out Le Jardin. Maria took a deep breath and pushed open the heavy wooden door. A smell of expensive perfume and rich food filled the air. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and soft piano music played in the background. The man at the front desk looked up from his papers. His eyes quickly scanned Maria from head to toe. His smile disappeared as he noticed her simple clothes and old bag. He glanced at Lisa, who was wearing her best dress but still looked out of place in this fancy setting. "Do you have a reservation?" he asked, his voice cold and unwelcoming. "Yes, under Maria Rodriguez for 2 people at 2 p.m., she replied politely. The man flipped through his book slowly, making them wait. Other customers walked past them, dressed in expensive suits and designer clothes. Maria noticed how quickly these people were seated with warm smiles and friendly greetings. "I see it here," he finally said, grabbing 2 menus. "Follow me." Instead of leading them to one of the nice tables by the windows, he walked them to the back corner near the kitchen door. The table was small and wobbly, positioned right where the servers rushed back and forth with dirty plates and food trays. "Is this the only table available?" Maria asked kindly. "This is what we have for walk-ins," the man lied. Even though he knew about their reservation, Maria felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. But she didn't want to make a scene in front of Lisa. They sat down at the uncomfortable table while the noise from the kitchen made it hard to talk. A young waitress approached their table 20 minutes later. She looked annoyed and didn't make eye contact with them. "What do you want to drink?" she asked quickly, tapping her pen on her notepad. "Could we please see the wine menu?" Maria asked. The waitress raised her eyebrows. "Wine is very expensive." "Here, maybe you prefer water?" Maria felt her face getting hot. "We'll have 2 glasses of your house white wine, please." The waitress shrugged and walked away without writing down their order. At the table next to them, a couple who had arrived after them was already enjoying their appetizers and laughing with their friendly server. 30 minutes passed before their drinks arrived. The wine glasses had fingerprints on them, and the wine was warm. Maria politely asked the waitress if they could get fresh glasses with cold wine. "This is how we serve wine here," the waitress said rudely. "If you don't like it, you can order something else." Lisa looked uncomfortable and whispered to her mother, "Mom, maybe we should just leave." "No, honey," Maria said quietly. "This is your special day and we're going to celebrate." They tried to order their food, but the waitress kept suggesting the cheapest items on the menu. When Maria ordered the salmon dish she had been looking forward to, the waitress said, "Are you sure? That's one of our most expensive dishes." "Yes, I'm sure," Maria replied firmly. Another hour went by, and their food still hadn't arrived. Maria watched other tables receive their meals quickly, even tables that had been seated after them. The kitchen staff kept bumping into their chairs as they rushed past with heavy trays. Finally, Maria stood up and walked to the front desk. The same man who had seated them was there, talking and laughing with a well-dressed couple. "Excuse me," Maria said politely. "We've been waiting for our food for over an hour. Could you please check on our order?" The man looked at her with irritation. "The kitchen is very busy today. You'll have to wait like everyone else." "I understand, but other people who came after us have already received their food," Maria explained calmly. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice," the man said loudly. Even though Maria had been speaking normally, other customers started looking in their direction. Maria felt all eyes on her as the man continued speaking loudly. "If you're not happy with our service, perhaps this restaurant isn't the right place for you," he said with a nasty smile. A woman at a nearby table whispered to her friend, "Some people just don't belong in places like this." Maria's hands started shaking, but she kept her voice steady. I just want the food we ordered. We made a reservation and we've been very patient. The restaurant manager appeared, a tall man in an expensive suit. He had been watching the situation from across the room. Is there a problem here? He asked, but he was looking at Maria like she was the problem. We've been waiting for our food for over an hour, Maria explained. I was just asking about our order. The manager crossed his arms. Ma'am, I've been watching your table, and you've been nothing but difficult since you arrived. You complained about your table, complained about your wine, and now you're causing a scene. I haven't caused any scene, Maria said, her voice slightly shaking. I've been very polite. I think it would be best if you and your daughter found somewhere else to eat, the manager said loudly. We need this table for customers who appreciate our establishment. The entire restaurant went quiet. Everyone was staring at Maria and Lisa. Some people had their phones out, probably taking pictures or videos. Lisa's face was red with embarrassment and tears were forming in her eyes. Please, Maria said quietly. This is my daughter's celebration. She just got into medical school. We just want to have a nice meal. Congratulations to your daughter, the manager said with fake politeness. But I'm going to have to ask you to leave now. You're disturbing our other guests. Maria looked around the restaurant. The other customers were still staring at them with judgment in their eyes. Some looked curious. Others seemed annoyed that their meal was being interrupted by this drama. The manager gestured toward the door. Please gather your things and go. Maria's heart was pounding, but she walked back to their table with as much dignity as she could manage. Lisa was crying quietly, trying to hide her face behind her napkin. Come on, sweetheart, Maria whispered. Let's go. As they stood up to leave, Maria noticed that their drinks were still on the table, even though they hadn't eaten anything and had been treated terribly. She reached into her purse and left money on the table to cover their drinks and a small tip. The walk to the door felt like the longest walk of Maria's life. Every step was watched by dozens of eyes. She kept her head high and her arm around Lisa's shoulder, but inside she felt humiliated and angry. Just before they reached the door, she heard someone whisper, "They should have known better than to come here." As they stepped outside into the bright afternoon sun, Maria finally let out the breath she had been holding. The fresh air felt good after the stuffy atmosphere inside the restaurant. Lisa wiped her tears and looked at her mother with confusion and hurt. "Why didn't you say something, Mom?" Lisa asked. "Why did you let them treat us like that?" Maria hugged her daughter tightly. She didn't have a good answer, at least not one that Lisa would understand right now. But deep down, Maria knew that sometimes the most powerful response to hatred is dignity. Maria and Lisa stood outside the restaurant, the warm afternoon breeze touching their faces. The sounds of the busy street seemed so different from the cold silence they had just left behind. Lisa was still wiping tears from her cheeks, trying to understand what had just happened to them. "Mom, I don't get it," Lisa said, her voice shaky. "Why were they so mean to us?" "We didn't do anything wrong." Maria put her arm around her daughter's shoulders and gently guided her away from the restaurant. Windows. She could see people inside still looking at them through the glass, probably talking about what they had just witnessed. "Some people judge others without knowing their story, sweetheart," Maria said softly. "They looked at our clothes and decided who we were before we even spoke. But that's not fair." Lisa's voice was getting louder, and Maria could see the anger building up inside her daughter. "You work so hard, Mom. You deserve to eat wherever you want. We had a reservation." Maria stopped walking and turned to face Lisa. She gently took her daughter's hands in hers. Lisa's hands were still trembling from the embarrassment and frustration. "You're absolutely right. It's not fair," Maria said, looking directly into Lisa's eyes. "But if I had started yelling and arguing in there, what do you think would have happened?" Lisa thought for a moment, sniffling. "They probably would have called security or the police." "Exactly. And then what would people say about us? They would think we really didn't belong there. They would say we were troublemakers who couldn't control ourselves." Maria squeezed Lisa's hands gently. Sometimes, honey, the strongest thing you can do is walk away with your head held high. But Mom, you left them money. After they treated you us like garbage, you still paid for those awful drinks and left a tip? Why? Lisa couldn't understand her mother's actions. Maria smiled sadly. Because that's who we are, Lisa. We don't become small or mean just because someone else is small and mean to us. I left that money because I wanted to show them that we have class and dignity, even when they don't. They started walking down the street again, passing other restaurants and shops. Maria noticed how Lisa kept looking back at Le Jardin, probably still processing what had happened. I keep thinking about all those people watching us, Lisa said. Quietly, they were all staring like we were some kind of show. Some of them looked like they enjoyed seeing us get kicked out. I know, baby, that's the hardest part. Not everyone in that room agreed with what happened, but nobody spoke up either. Sometimes people stay quiet because they're afraid or because they don't want to get involved. They walked past a small family diner called Tony's Kitchen. The windows were clean but simple, and Maria could see families inside laughing and talking over their meals. A handwritten sign in the window said, "Everyone welcome, come as you are." You know what? Maria said, stopping in front of the diner. I'm still hungry and this is still your celebration day. How about we try this place instead? Lisa looked at the modest restaurant, then back at her mother. Are you sure, Mom? I mean, after what just happened, maybe we should just go home. Absolutely not, Maria said firmly. We came out to celebrate your acceptance to medical school, and that's exactly what we're going to do. No fancy restaurant is going to steal this moment from us. They pushed open the door to Tony's Kitchen, and immediately the atmosphere felt different. A warm smell of home cooking filled the air, and they could hear the friendly chatter of families enjoying their meals. An older woman with gray hair and a genuine smile approached them. Hi there, just the two of you today, she asked warmly. Yes. Please, Maria replied, still feeling a bit cautious after their previous experience. Perfect, follow me. I've got a nice table by the window where you can watch the world go by. The woman led them to a clean table with comfortable chairs and a small vase with fresh flowers. They sat down. Lisa whispered, Mom, she didn't even look at our clothes. I noticed that too. Maria whispered back with a small smile. The same woman returned with menus and glasses of ice water. I'm Betty, and I'll be taking care of you today. Can I start you off with something to drink? We'd like to see your wine list, please, Maria said, half expecting another rude response. Of course, we have a nice selection. Our house white is really popular, and it's perfectly chilled. Betty's enthusiasm was genuine and infectious. When Betty walked away, Lisa leaned across the table. Mom, can I ask you something? Anything, sweetheart. Back at that fancy place, when they were being so horrible to us, you seemed so calm, but I could see your hands shaking. Were you scared? Maria paused, thinking about how honest to be with her daughter. I wasn't scared exactly, but I was hurt, really hurt. And angry too. I wanted to tell that manager exactly what I thought of him and his restaurant. So why didn't you? Because, Lisa, when people treat you badly, you have two choices. You can let their ugliness make you ugly too, or you can choose to stay true to who you are. I've learned that how people treat you says more about them than it says about you. Betty returned with their wine, and it was perfectly cold in sparkling clean glasses. Have you ladies decided what you'd like to eat? They ordered simple meals, grilled chicken for Maria and a burger for Lisa, as they waited for their food. Maria noticed how different this place felt. Children were laughing at nearby tables, elderly couples were holding hands, and teenagers were celebrating something with their parents. Everyone seemed comfortable and happy. You know what I realized? Lisa said, taking a sip of her wine. That fancy restaurant wasn't really fancy at all. I mean, the decorations were expensive, but the people working there were ugly on the inside. This place feels more classy to me. Maria felt proud of her daughter's insight. You're going to be an amazing doctor, Lisa. Do you know why? Why? Because you already understand that what matters most is how we treat people, not what we look like or how much money we have. Your patients are going to be lucky to have someone who sees people's hearts, not just their appearances. Their food arrived quickly, and it was delicious. The chicken was perfectly seasoned, and Lisa declared her burger the best I've ever had. They talked and laughed, and slowly the sting from their earlier experience began to fade. "Mom, I have a confession," Lisa said between bites. "When we walked into that first place, I was nervous. I kept worrying that we didn't belong there, that people would judge us. And they did judge us, but now I realize that was their problem, not ours." "That's a very mature way to look at it," Maria said. "And you know what? We do belong anywhere. We want to go, as long as we treat others with respect and kindness." As they finished their meal, Betty came over to check on them. "How was everything?" "Perfect," Maria said. "This has been exactly what we needed." "I couldn't help but notice you two seem to be celebrating something special," Betty said with a warm smile. "My daughter just got accepted to medical school," Maria said proudly. "Oh my goodness, congratulations." Betty beamed at Lisa. "You know what? This calls for dessert on the house. We make the most amazing chocolate cake." As Betty walked away to get their dessert, Lisa reached across the table and took her mother's hand. "Thank you, Mom. For what?" "For showing me how to handle today with grace. For teaching me that our worth isn't determined by what other people think of us. And for not letting anyone ruin our celebration." Maria squeezed her daughter's hand, feeling grateful that something beautiful had come out of such an ugly experience. Sometimes the best lessons come from the hardest moments. Later that evening, Maria sat at her small kitchen table with her laptop open in front of her. The house was quiet now. Lisa had gone to bed early, emotionally drained from their difficult day. Maria stared at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she thought about what had happened at Le Jardin. What the restaurant staff didn't know was that Maria wasn't just an ordinary customer looking for a nice meal. For the past 15 years, she had built a successful career. As a restaurant consultant, working under her professional name Maria Chun Rodriguez, she helped struggling restaurants turn their businesses around and taught successful ones how to maintain their standards. 3 weeks ago, she had received an interesting phone call from a company called Premier Hospitality Group. They owned several high-end restaurants across the city, including Le Jardin. The voice on the phone belonged to someone from their corporate office. "We've been having some complaints about customer service at one of our locations," the woman had explained. "We need someone to do a mystery evaluation. Someone who can go in as a regular customer and give us an honest report about what they experience." Maria had done hundreds of these mystery evaluations over the years. It was one of her specialties. Restaurant owners often thought they knew how their customers were being treated, but the reality was sometimes very different. Staff members acted differently when they knew the boss was watching versus when they thought no one important was paying attention. "Which restaurant?" Maria had asked. "Le Jardin on 5th Street. We've heard rumors about discriminatory service, but we need concrete evidence before we can take action. We need someone who can blend in, someone who won't be recognized as a consultant." That's when Maria had gotten the idea to dress simply and bring Lisa along. What better way to test how they treated regular people than to actually look like regular people? She had purposely chosen her oldest dress and worn her most basic jewelry. She wanted to see how Le Jardin treated customers who didn't look wealthy. Now, sitting in her kitchen, Maria opened a new document on her laptop. The title read, "Mystery Evaluation Report, Le Jardin Restaurant, Customer Service Assessment." She began typing, documenting everything that had happened from the moment they walked through the door. She wrote about how the host had looked them up and down with obvious judgment. She described being seated at the worst table in the restaurant, even though she had a confirmed reservation. She detailed the rude behavior of their waitress and the long delays in service, but the most important part was what happened when she tried to address the problems politely. Maria typed carefully, remembering every word the manager had said to her. She described how he had accused her of being difficult when she had simply asked about their food order. She wrote about how he had spoken loudly to embarrass her in front of other customers. Maria paused her typing and reached for her phone. During their time at the restaurant, she had discreetly recorded several conversations using a voice memo app. This was something she always did during mystery evaluations, and it was completely legal since restaurants were public spaces. She listened to the recording of her conversation with the manager. Hearing his words again made her angry all over again, but now she was glad she had captured his exact phrases. "You've been nothing but difficult since you arrived," his voice said through her phone speaker. "I think it would be best if you and your daughter found somewhere else to eat." Maria added these direct quotes to her report, along with exact timestamps. She wrote about how other customers had been treated during the same time period, describing the warm service she had witnessed at nearby tables. She noted that several families who arrived after them had been seated at better tables and served much faster. The most damaging part of her report was the pattern she had observed. During their 2 hours at the restaurant, Maria had watched the staff interact with dozens of customers. Well-dressed customers received immediate attention, friendly smiles, and quick service. Customers who looked less wealthy or were dressed more casually received slower service and colder treatment. She had even witnessed the staff make comments about other customers' appearances when they thought no one was listening. The same waitress who had been rude to them had whispered to another server about a family at a corner table, saying they probably couldn't afford to be here. Maria included all of this in her report. She wrote about the hostile environment the restaurant had created, where customers were judged and treated differently based on their appearance and perceived social status. She explained how this kind of discrimination could not only hurt the restaurant's reputation, but could also create legal problems. As she continued writing, Maria thought about all the times over the years when she had helped restaurants improve their customer service. She had seen businesses lose thousands of dollars because their staff treated customers poorly. She had watched restaurants close down because word spread about their bad service, but this case was different. This wasn't just about poor service or untrained staff. This was about deliberate discrimination and prejudice. The management at Le Jardin had created a culture where judging customers based on their appearance was not only acceptable but encouraged. Maria opened another document and began writing a second report. This one focused on recommendations for fixing the problems. She suggested immediate staff retraining programs, new customer service policies, and regular mystery evaluations to ensure standards were maintained. She recommended that the restaurant implement a service equality policy, where all customers would receive the same level of respect and attention regardless of their appearance or perceived wealth. She suggested training sessions about unconscious bias and cultural sensitivity, but Maria also knew that some problems went deeper than training could fix. The manager who had humiliated her and Lisa showed a level of prejudice that would be difficult to change. Some staff members might need to be replaced entirely. As she worked on her reports, Maria thought about Lisa and how their experience had affected her daughter. Lisa was about to enter medical school, where she would learn to treat all patients with equal care and respect regardless of their background. Today's experience had been a harsh but valuable lesson about how prejudice worked in the real world. Maria also thought about all the other customers who had probably been treated badly at Le Jardin over the years. How many people had been humiliated and made to feel unwelcome? How many families had special occasions ruined by discriminatory treatment? She remembered watching the other customers' faces during their confrontation with the manager. Some had looked uncomfortable, as if they knew what was happening was wrong but didn't want to get involved. Others had seemed to enjoy the drama, perhaps feeling superior because they weren't the ones being asked to leave. By midnight, Maria had completed both reports. The first document was 12 pages long and included detailed descriptions of every problematic interaction they had experienced. The second report outlined a comprehensive plan for improving the restaurant's culture and customer service standards. She attached the voice recordings to her email and prepared to send everything to Premier Hospitality Group, but before hitting send, Maria sat back in her chair and thought about the bigger picture. This wasn't just about one restaurant or one bad experience. This was about standing up for all the people who had been treated unfairly, all the families who had been judged and found wanting by people who thought they were better than others. Maria looked at the clock on her computer. It was almost 1 a.m., but she knew the corporate executives would want to see this report first thing in the morning. She typed a brief email explaining that she had completed her evaluation and that the findings were extremely concerning. Just before sending the email, Maria added one final note. The discriminatory practices observed at Le Jardin represent a serious threat to your company's reputation and could result in significant legal and financial consequences if not addressed immediately. She clicked send and closed her laptop. Tomorrow would bring consequences that the staff at Le Jardin could never have imagined when they decided to judge a woman by her simple dress and worn handbag. At 6:47 a.m., the email alert chimed on David Thompson's phone. As the CEO of Premier Hospitality Group, David always checked his messages early. But this particular email made him sit up straight in his bed. The subject line read, "Urgent Le Jardin Mystery Evaluation Complete. Immediate action required." David had been expecting this report for weeks, but he wasn't prepared for what he read. As he scrolled through Maria's detailed documentation, his coffee grew cold on his nightstand. By the time he finished reading both reports, his hands were shaking with anger and disbelief. "This can't be real," he muttered to himself, but the voice recordings attached to the email proved otherwise. David listened to the manager's voice humiliating Maria and her daughter, and he felt sick to his stomach. This wasn't just poor customer service, this was deliberate discrimination that could destroy everything his company had worked to build. David immediately called his assistant. "Cancel all my meetings today. Get the legal team, HR department, and regional managers into the conference room by 9 a.m. We have a crisis situation." Meanwhile, across the city, other executives were receiving the same report. Jennifer Walsh, the regional operations director, was in her car when she opened the email at a red light. She pulled over to the side of the road and read the entire report, her face growing redder with each paragraph. She had hired the manager at Le Jardin personally, and now she realized she had made a terrible mistake. Robert Kim, the company's head lawyer, was already at his office when the report arrived. As he read through Maria's documentation, he started making notes about potential lawsuits, discrimination claims, and public relations disasters. This was exactly the kind of situation that could cost the company millions of dollars and destroy their reputation permanently. By 8 a.m., David was pacing around his office, making phone calls. He called the company's public relations firm first. "We might have a discrimination scandal on our hands," he told them. "I need you to prepare crisis management strategies immediately." Next, he called the insurance company to discuss potential liability issues. Then he made the most difficult call of all to the other board members who had invested in Premier Hospitality Group. "We have a serious problem at Le Jardin," David explained to the board chairman. "I'm sending you a report that will shock you. We need to take immediate action before this becomes public." At 9 a.m. sharp, 12 executives filed into the conference room at Premier Hospitality Group headquarters. The atmosphere was tense as David stood at the front of the room with a thick folder in his hands. "What you're about to hear will anger and embarrass all of us," David began. "Yesterday, our mystery consultant experienced discrimination so severe that it could end our business relationship with Le Jardin permanently." He played the voice recordings for the room. The silence was deafening as they listened to the managers. Words. When the recordings ended, several people were shaking their heads in disgust. "Who is this consultant?" asked Jennifer Walsh. "Do we know if she's planning to go public with this?" David smiled grimly. "That's where this gets even more interesting. The consultant is Maria Chun Rodriguez." Several people in the room gasped. Everyone in the restaurant industry knew that name. Maria Chun Rodriguez was legendary for her ability to transform failing restaurants into successful businesses. Her recommendations had generated millions of dollars in revenue for her clients over the years. "You mean the Maria Chun Rodriguez?" asked Robert Kim. The woman who turned around the Blue Room and made it the most successful restaurant in the downtown district? The same one, David confirmed. She's consulted for some of the biggest restaurant chains in the country. Her reputation is spotless, and her word carries tremendous weight in our industry. The room fell silent as everyone realized the full scope of their problem. They hadn't just discriminated against a regular customer. They had humiliated one of the most respected professionals in their field. How much damage are we looking at? Asked the financial director. Robert Kim spoke up. If this goes public, we're looking at potential lawsuits, boycotts, and massive reputation damage. Ms. Chun Rodriguez has over 50,000 followers on professional networks. One post from her could reach thousands of restaurant industry professionals. But that's not even the worst part, David continued. Read her professional background. She's worked with restaurants that compete directly with our other locations. If we lose her as a potential consultant, our competitors could hire her instead. Jennifer Walsh was frantically scrolling through her phone. I'm looking at her LinkedIn profile right now. She's connected to food critics, restaurant reviewers, and industry journalists. If any of them hear about this, it gets worse, David sighed. According to her report, other customers witnessed the discrimination. She documented at least 6 people who saw the entire incident. Any one of them could post about it on social media. The marketing director raised her hand. Have we checked social media already? Sometimes these things spread online before we even know about them. David nodded. I had our social media team do a search this morning. So far, nothing has been posted, but that could change at any moment. The HR director looked worried. What kind of legal exposure are we facing? Robert Kim opened his laptop. Discrimination in public accommodations is a serious civil rights issue. If Ms. Chin Rodriguez decides to file a lawsuit, she would have a very strong case. We have her voice. Recordings as evidence, plus potential witnesses. And the financial impact? Asked the board liaison. If we lose the Le Jardin location, that's $2.3 million in annual revenue, said the financial director. But if this scandal spreads to our other restaurants, we could lose much more. Our brand reputation took years to build, and it could be destroyed in days. David looked around the room at the worried faces. There's one more thing you need to know. I did some research on Ms. Chun Rodriguez this morning. She doesn't just evaluate restaurants, she also provides expert testimony in discrimination. Lawsuits. She's helped other customers win cases against restaurants that treated them unfairly. The room went completely silent. Everyone was starting to understand that they weren't just dealing with a customer service problem. They were facing a potential legal and financial disaster. What does she want? Asked Jennifer Walsh. Has she made any demands? David shook his head. That's what's surprising. She hasn't asked for anything. No money, no apologies, no special treatment. She simply submitted her professional report as requested and included her recommendations for improvement. That's actually worse, said Robert Kim. If she's not asking for anything, it means she's probably considering other options, like going public or filing a lawsuit. The marketing director was typing frantically on her phone. I'm checking news outlets and restaurant blogs. Still nothing, but food industry news travels fast. We probably have a few hours before this leaks. David closed the folder and looked around the room. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to Le Jardin right now, all of us. We're going to personally apologize to every staff member who witnessed this discrimination, and we're going to make immediate changes. What about the manager? Asked Jennifer Walsh. He's fired, effective immediately, David said firmly. And we're going to review every other staff member's employment status. Anyone who participated in or witnessed this discrimination without reporting it will face consequences. The HR director raised her hand again. What if Ms. Chun Rodriguez has already decided to pursue legal action? David stood up and straightened his tie. Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But right now, our priority is making sure this never happens again and trying to salvage what we can of our reputation. As the executives gathered their things and prepared to leave for Le Jardin, David made one final announcement. From this day forward, every one of our restaurants will have new policies about customer treatment. No exceptions, no excuses. We're going to make sure that what happened yesterday never happens again at any of our locations. The convoy of cars was already being prepared in the parking garage. In 1 hour, Le Jardin would receive visitors they never expected to see. At exactly 10:30 a.m., 5 black luxury cars pulled up in front of Le Jardin restaurant. The drivers parked in a perfect line along the curb, and within moments, a stream of well-dressed executives began stepping out onto the sidewalk. Passers-by stopped to stare, wondering if a celebrity or politician was visiting the fancy French restaurant. Inside Le Jardin, the morning prep work was in full swing. The same manager who had humiliated Maria the day before was checking inventory sheets, completely unaware that his world was about to change forever. The host who had seated Maria at the worst table was polishing wine glasses, and the rude waitress was setting up tables for the lunch service. The first person through the door was David Thompson, the CEO. He was followed by 11 other executives, including lawyers, HR specialists, and regional managers. The staff looked up in confusion as this parade of serious-looking people in expensive suits filled their restaurant. "Excuse me," the host said nervously, approaching David. "Are you here for a reservation? We don't open for lunch service until 11:30. David looked at the young man with a stern expression. "I'm David Thompson, CEO of Premier Hospitality Group. We own this restaurant. I need to speak with your manager immediately." The host's face went pale. He had never seen the actual owner of the restaurant before, and he certainly hadn't expected him to show up unannounced with an army of corporate executives. "Yes, sir, right away, sir," the host stammered, rushing toward the back office where the manager was working. Within seconds, the manager appeared, straightening his tie and trying to look professional. When he saw the crowd of executives, his confident demeanor began to crack. "Mr. Thompson, what a surprise! If I had known you were coming, I would have prepared something special for you," the manager said, his voice shaking slightly. David didn't smile or offer any pleasantries. "We need to talk. Call all your staff together immediately. Everyone who was working yesterday afternoon needs to be here right now." The manager's confusion was obvious. "Sir, is there a problem? Has something happened?" "Just get your staff," David said coldly. "Now." Within 10 minutes, the entire day shift staff had gathered in the main dining room. They stood in a nervous cluster near the kitchen door, whispering among themselves and trying to figure out why so many corporate people had suddenly appeared. Maria arrived at exactly 11 a.m., this time dressed in a professional navy blue business suit. Her hair was perfectly styled, and she carried a leather briefcase. When she walked through the door, the transformation was stunning. She looked like the successful business consultant she was, confident and authoritative. The host who had judged her so harshly the day before didn't recognize her at first. When he did, his mouth fell open in shock. The rude waitress actually took a step backward, her face turning white with fear. "Ladies and gentlemen," David announced to the assembled staff, "I'd like you to meet Maria Chun Rodriguez, one of the most respected restaurant consultants in the industry." The manager's face went from confusion to horror as he realized who Maria was. Yesterday, he had humiliated and ejected a woman who turned out to be a professional expert hired to evaluate his restaurant. "Miss Chun Rodriguez was here yesterday evening as our mystery consultant," David continued. "She was conducting an evaluation of your customer service standards on our behalf." You could have heard a pin drop in the restaurant. Several staff members were looking at each other with growing panic, remembering how they had treated Maria and her daughter. David opened a folder and began reading from Maria's report. According to Ms. Chun Rodriguez's documentation, she and her daughter experienced discriminatory treatment from the moment they entered this establishment. He read specific quotes from the report, describing how the host had judged them based on their appearance, how the waitress had been deliberately rude, and how the manager had publicly humiliated them. But the most damaging finding, David continued, is that this discriminatory behavior appears to be systematic and intentional, not just an isolated incident. The manager tried to speak up. Sir, if I may explain what happened yesterday, ... No, David said firmly. You may not explain. We have voice recordings of everything you said. We have documentation of your behavior. And we have witnesses who saw how you treated our consultant and her daughter. Jennifer Walsh, the Regional Operations Director, stepped forward. As of this moment, you are terminated. Security will escort you from the premises, and you will not be allowed to return. The manager's face went red with anger and embarrassment. You can't fire me over one complaint. I've been managing restaurants for 15 years. This isn't about one complaint, David replied. This is about creating a hostile environment for customers based on their appearance and perceived social status. This is about discrimination, which is not only morally wrong but also illegal. Two security guards who had arrived with the corporate team stepped forward to escort the former manager out. As he gathered his personal items, he glared at Maria with obvious resentment. This is ridiculous, he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. She was dressed like she couldn't afford to eat here. David's voice cut through the tension like a knife. And that right there is exactly why you're being fired. A professional restaurant treats every customer with respect and dignity, regardless of how they're dressed or how much money they appear to have. After the manager was removed, David turned to address the remaining staff. The rest of you need to understand that what happened yesterday was completely unacceptable. We've built our company reputation on excellence and hospitality, and you've damaged that reputation. The host raised his hand nervously. Sir, what's going to happen to us? Robert Kim, the company lawyer, stepped forward. That depends on your level of involvement in yesterday's incident and your willingness to participate in mandatory retraining programs. David looked directly at the waitress who had been rude to Maria. You specifically showed discriminatory behavior toward our consultant. You made assumptions about her ability to pay based on her appearance, and you provided deliberately poor service. The waitress started crying. I'm sorry, I didn't know she was important. I thought, that's exactly the problem, Maria spoke. For the first time since entering the restaurant, you thought you could treat people badly if they didn't look important to you. But every customer deserves respect, whether they're dressed in designer clothes or work uniforms. David nodded. From today forward, this restaurant will implement new customer service standards. Every employee will attend sensitivity training. We'll have regular mystery evaluations to ensure these standards are maintained. The HR director opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. Everyone will sign new employment agreements that include strict anti-discrimination policies. Any future violations will result in immediate termination. Maria stepped forward and addressed the staff directly. I want you to understand something. Yesterday wasn't just about me and my daughter. It was about every customer who doesn't look wealthy enough for your standards. How many families have you made feel unwelcome? How many special occasions have you ruined with your judgments? Several staff members were now crying, realizing the full impact of their behavior. But here's the thing, Maria continued. People can change. Restaurants can change. If you're willing to learn and grow from this experience, you can become better at your jobs and better people overall. David turned to Maria. Ms. Chun Rodriguez, our company would be honored if you would consider a consulting contract to help us implement these changes properly. Maria smiled for the first time since entering the restaurant. I'd be happy to help, but I have one condition. What's that? I want to bring my daughter back here for dinner next week. I want her to see how this place looks when it's treating all customers with the respect and kindness they deserve. David extended his hand to Maria. It's a deal. And this meal will be our treat, of course. As the corporate team began discussing implementation plans and new policies, the remaining staff slowly returned to their work. The atmosphere in the restaurant had changed completely. Where there had once been arrogance and judgment, there was now humility and a genuine desire to do better. The story of what happened at Le Jardin spread quickly through the restaurant industry. It became a powerful reminder that every customer matters, regardless of their appearance or background, and that treating people with dignity isn't just good business, it's the right thing to do.